want to wine on you, show you what this waistline do all sorts of things to you. I wanna make you my boo. Now I want to wine on you, show you what this body do. Put this body.
What is up, you guys? It's Dee. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. Also welcome to your second class of fashion 101 or sewing 101. In today's video, I'm mostly going to be talking about fabric, understanding fabric, and how to go about cutting fabric with the understanding of patterns and pattern making. Basically, I'm going to be giving you guys a glimpse of understanding what fabric is all about and so on and so forth. For those of you guys who don't know, I am a fashion student. I'm currently studying second year in fashion and surface design at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, which is located in Cape Town, Western Cape, South Africa. And so I have a little bit of idea of what exactly it is that I'm talking about. Now, I know that some of you guys are quite relatively new when it comes to sewing, and there are a couple of things that I do feel that it is important for you guys to understand. It's crucial for you guys to understand in order to be able to do your own mini DIYs, your own clothes, and who knows, maybe start your own business. So for those of you guys who are currently new and would just like to get an understanding for, understanding in general of what fashion is about, or an introduction into fashion and the fashion industry, then welcome to my channel. Okay, so first of all, understanding fabrics. Now, there are usually two types of fabrics that you two to three types of fabrics, but let's just say two, just to be safe. You usually get our natural fabric, natural fibers, which are made from plants or animals and stuff like that. These are not man-made. Well, they are eventually, but they come from natural materials or natural I don't know, what should I say? It's organic. Yeah, it's basically organic. An example of these materials would be wool, cotton, and your linen. So if you're a person who would like to, go for sustainable fashion and eco-friendly fashion, those are the materials that you would usually tend to work with. And, your silk, obviously. And then there is another form of materials which are referred to synthetic materials. Now, these materials are basically man-made. They can be made from plastic and, a whole lot of things. And those type of materials would be like satin and what else? There are a lot, actually. So I can't really list them, but this is just to give you guys an idea of what kind of materials you could possibly work with. And sometimes you can get a blend of a natural material and a synthetic material together. So yeah. So usually you just this is basically what we learn in first year and second year, that it's important to differentiate or to know the difference between your two fibers or your two materials, your two types of materials, whether they are natural or they are synthetic. Eventually you start learning things like how to tell which ones are naturals and how to tell which ones are synthetic. This comes with various forms of test, like the burning test method and stuff like that, but that is a conversation for another day. Now, today what I want to focus on specifically is fiber, and how to tell fabric, how to not necessarily tell fabric, but how to tell the right side from the wrong side, how to go about cutting, and how to go about reading a pattern. So first things first, let's move to our table, and I'm going to show you guys a series of different types of materials. And something that is really important in the fashion industry or in fashion in general, whether you're doing fashion at home, DIY videos and stuff like that, a term that you need to be familiar with, and you are probably familiar with it in terms of other YouTubers that you've watched doing sewing tutorials. Now, this term is called a salvage. Now, what exactly do we mean when we say a salvage? Now, I'm going to read this out to you because I don't want to F it up. So let's just go back into it. So a salvage is a woven edge of a fabric or a material, and it prevents that particular material from fraying or unraveling. Okay, I'm also going to show you guys how a salvage looks like. But for those of you guys who don't really understand what am I saying here, because this is a Google definition of what a salvage is, Basically, when you buy your material, you will see that on two ends of your material, there's this specific line. Now, that is what we call a salvage. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what a salvage is. Okay, so on the table, we have what we call a silky satin. And this satin is probably one of the cheapest satins you could probably find because it is 30 Rand at the fabric shops. Now, what I'm going to be showing you guys is that this right over here, as we are trying to identify a salvage on your material. When you buy your material, it will come out looking something like this. And you will see that it has these lines over here. And sometimes these particular lines can be dotted, as you guys can see right over here. Now, this will be indicating your salvage, as you can see. Now, satin is a material that frays very quickly. So if you are working with satin, I would always suggest that just start sewing immediately. Relatively new in terms of working with this type of material. As you guys can see, I'm just showing you guys an example here. This material frails like today, now, today. So whenever you are working with this type of material, it is best that when you cut to sew immediately. So as you guys can see, here is our salvage. Now, our salvage is also important in terms of identifying the right side and the wrong side of your material. Now, with materials such as satin, it's relatively easy to find which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side. Now, satin, especially this particular satin, this silky satin, it has a nice shine over here, which is the right side. And then when you turn it over, you can see that this side is a little bit dull and yeah, it's just looking boring. So this would be the wrong side of your material. So a salvage can help you identify the right side and the wrong side of your material. Now I'm also going to bring another material onto the table. Now I'm not particularly sure what this material is. I don't know the name of it. But as you can see, it has a different form of salvage. As you see here, the salvage is located right here, but the material also starts here. So it is a safe distance away. And this one, you don't necessarily need the salvage to inform you which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side. As you guys can see, the wrong side is, once again, a bit more dull and boring, while the right side is a nice, shiny color happening over here. And then I'm also going to make an example with one last material. Should I? Okay, no, I think let's just use this material for the time being. This is also another example. Now, this one, you can also quickly tell which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side. As you guys can see over here, this would be the wrong side and this would be the right side. But it is important to know where your salvage is, because your salvage will also help you know how to cut your material. So now, before we can move on to learning how to cut our material, the most important factor right now is understanding patterns. And what are patterns? What is a pattern? Let me start off by explaining exactly what a pattern is. Now, in the fashion industry, you will be familiar with the term patterns. A pattern is basically a flat template which is made on paper or board with a cutting instructions for the. So basically, in my understanding of what a pattern is, because that is the Google version of what a pattern is. So basically, your pattern is a 2D version of your 3D body. And most of the time, we usually construct a pattern on the half side. So instead of creating a pattern on, like a full pattern of your front and a full pattern on your back, we usually create half front and half back. Obviously, this differs depending on the design of your product or your garment that in which you are designing. So right here I have an example of a pattern that I have recently constructed at school as we are doing a men's tailored blazer. If you guys haven't seen my shorts on my blazer, then what are you waiting for? Go there. Anyways, so there are a few things that you need to have on a pattern. Now, as you guys can see, I'm just going to bring this pattern a little bit closer to you guys. Now, you can see that there is this one line over here. What does this line indicate? So this is the actual pattern. And then this right here is what we call a seam allowance. Exactly. This is a seam allowance. Now, on your pattern paper, you will always have certain instructions on it. This being it makes it easier for somebody to understand your pattern should they ever want to use your pattern. It makes you understand your pattern should you ever want to use your pattern. And also, if you want to send your pattern, say for instance you want to open a business in the fashion industry, open your own store and stuff like that, and you really don't have the time to be making all of these garments, what you can always do is create a pattern, buy your materials, and send your garments to a CMT. Now that's a topic for another day. Anyways, CMT stands for cut, make, and trim. And these people are responsible. Okay, let me just explain it. These people are basically responsible for making your clothes in a certain amount of batches, and then they send it back to you, and then you sell it as your own. Well, it is your own because it's your design, it's your pattern, but they are just responsible for constructing these clothes for you at a specific time with a specific number of items. Okay, back to our pattern. Now, as you guys can see, there are a couple of writings that are on this pattern. Number one, we have it labeled as number one. So when you are designing a garment, you have to consider how many pieces there are on your garment. So number one would be, your back. Number two would be your front. Number three would be your sleeves. Number four would be your pockets and any other thing that makes up this whole garment of yours. Number two, you will also label, is this garment for men or is it for women? So you'd obviously identify the gender in which you're using. You can either say unisex, men, female, girl, boys, and so on and so forth. Then obviously you're going to indicate that is this the back or is this the front? Because it is important to know which pattern is your back and which pattern is your front. Because you can't use the front pattern to make a back. And you can't use the back pattern to make your front, because the back is different from the front and the front is different from the back. And then you're also going to label what type of pattern is this. So if you're making a satin dress, then you will write a woman's back satin slip-on dress, and that's that. Then another important factor is size. It is always important to put in size so that we know that, okay, this is for size small, this is for size medium, this is for size large. Or if you are using numbers, this is size 10, this is size 12, this is size, 14, and so on and so forth, because it is important to know this information. And also, if your pattern has a center back seam right here, I'll explain it eventually, but if your pattern has a center back seam, then you will have to say cut twice. How many times do you cut it? So for instance, I'm making a blazer. If I'm making a blazer, then I know that my fronts are not going to be one piece. They're going to be two pieces because they're going to be combined with a button. I need to be able to open this blazer up and be able to close it. So therefore, I'm going to require two fronts, left and right. And same goes with your shirt. But if I was making a dress, like a satin slip-on dress, then I will say cut once. Then I know that, okay, I'm cutting once for the back and I'm cutting once for the front. And also I would indicate right over here, right where it says center back, on top of it, I will state cut on fold. That means we fold our material and then only can we cut. Then when we unravel it, it creates the whole full image for us. Now I'm going to show you guys on the material how exactly to demonstrate this. So before we move on to the material and how to go about placing your patterns on your material, I also want you to take note of this line. Now, this is what we call a gradient line right over here. This always indicates how exactly is the pattern supposed to be cut on the material. This line always either has to be parallel to the selvage all the time. This line always has to be parallel to your selvage, whether you are doing a bias cut, you are doing a straight cut, it just always has to be parallel to your material or to your selvage. It is important that you remember this. This is the most important information ever. Okay, so I have gone ahead and I have laid my material flat. Don't mind my little black book over there. It's just, helping me from allowing this fabric to slip. Now this is my right side and this is my wrong side, and you guys can see here is my salvage. So now what I would do to go about placing our fabric, our pattern, is that you place your pattern exactly like this, bearing in mind that this gradient line over here has to be parallel to your salvage. It's always important you guys keep this in mind. Now I also want to show you guys what I meant when I said bias cutting. Now imagine this was our new pattern. Imagine this was our new pattern. Now as you guys can see, I have a line that is going diagonally. Now this is usually how we go about cutting a satin material, especially if you would like for your material to drape, or if you are cutting a specific pattern on, like if your material has a specific pattern on it. And by pattern I mean, you know, the pattern that you usually find on the fabric, like this one for instance. This is a pattern. If your material has a specific pattern to it and it requires you to cut it at a bias cut, your pattern would have this line going across it. Now this line is at a 45-degree angle. So the way you'd go about putting your fabric on top of your material, putting your pattern on top of your material, is that you would just turn this like this, and then this line will be parallel to the salvage. Now this is what we mean when we say bias cut. So it means that no matter what happens, this line over here always stays parallel to your salvage. It does not change. You don't make up the rules. We don't make up the rules. We just take the textbook and we just repeat. So whenever you guys are doing any satin work, not necessarily any, because you can go about cutting satin without necessarily doing a bias cut. However, if you are looking for a drape, for instance, if you're doing like a wedding dress or a bridal dress or any dress for that matter that requires draping, then this is how you would construct your material. This is how you'd construct your pattern. Your pattern, your gradient line across the pattern. So if this, for instance, I'm just going to make an example over here with this pattern. Never mind this gradient line. So say, for instance, this is our new gradient line right over here. Even with this pattern, I would have to turn it like this until this line, this new gradient line, is parallel to our salvage. Then only can I go about cutting my material. Also, another way you can go about cutting your material, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the term cut on fold. So this is what we mean when we say cut on fold. Usually you would have your right sides facing each other. Now guys, understand right side facing each other. This is the right side. We are gonna make it face each other. This is how you go about making it face each other. So now we've got our right sides facing each other. Once again, we have a clear view of our salvage. And then, now as you guys can see, my pattern said cut twice on fabric. Now you can also do this. You can cut twice on fabric. So you only cut it once. You're saving time, you're saving energy, and you're saving fabric. So now when you are done cutting this, you will have two pieces of a bag. However, if you're going to be cutting this on fold, now we're going to flip our material like this, right where it folds, and we are going to start cutting all the way around. And that is basically how you go about cutting your material. So I hope this video was relatively informative, and I hope it gave you guys an idea of basically how to go about, cutting and understanding your fabric, because that is extremely important. You need to know which materials you need to cut on a bias cut, and you need to know which materials you need to just cut however. But making sure that your gradient line is always parallel to your salvage. And I hope this video was very informative, and I hope that you guys understood. And I guess this is the end of our class, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share with your family and friends so we can all be family and friends. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.